Well, good morning, everybody. It's 10 a.m. Welcome. LuxeSF is delighted to have you with us today. We're going to be discussing the subject Millennials and Gen Z. Their drinking behavior will surprise you. So with that, we're in for one doozy of a program this morning. Before we go any further, a couple of quick housekeeping items, if I may. We've muted all of your sound and video, but if for any reason you see yourself on the screen, please hit that mute button. For some unknown reason, people still manage to get through our screens from time to time. There is a chat button at the bottom. If you've got a question that you want to pose to Roger or have as part of the discussion today, just pop it into that chat button. I'll be watching it down there, and we'll be able to incorporate or get Roger to provide an answer as we're going. And the inevitable question I get, are we recording today's program? Yes, we are. Late this afternoon or early tomorrow morning, you will receive a LuxStream email. Check your spam folders with a recording link because we post all of these programs to YouTube. So yes, you will be able to see the program if for any reason you're called away in the next hour. So why did we elect to conduct today's program? Well, as we wrote earlier, the warning signs have been evident for some time as mortality and retirement tsunamis confront the boomer cohort, of which I am one, with alarming closeness and speed. Who will pick up the slack in terms of alcoholic beverage consumption and wine in particular? And to cast needed light on the subject, we have the results of an in-depth research project that addresses this specific topic. This study delivers a comprehensive and deep understanding of Gen Z and Millennials' broad-based alcoholic and non-alcoholic beverage and wine habits, as well as their practices and their preferences. Now, to present the findings today, we're very lucky and delighted to introduce Roger Brooks, who has over 25 years of diverse marketing research, consulting, and executive experience, ranging from marketing research and strategy consulting with leading digital, social media, and technology companies to senior management positions with major marketing research and startup organizations. And companies he's worked for or advised include Google, YouTube, LinkedIn, Facebook, Visa, HP, and Pfizer. His experience also includes syndicated research for the wine industry. He was a co-author of the Merrill Wine Monitor on the subject of the U.S. wine consumer and consumption patterns. So what we're going to do today is let Roger take you through, he's not going to take you through the whole report, but certainly the top line results of this extensive survey study that they conducted. He'll deliver some top line findings, and then when that's over, we'll allow as much time as he needs for that. We will then delve into the subject matter and open it up to question audience Q&A. So with that, Roger, we welcome you. It's a pleasure to have you. And the floor, sir, is yours.
Thank you very much, Alf. And thank you, everybody, for taking the time out of your schedule to attend this webinar today. I'm going to share my screen with the report. I also want to thank Alf and Tricia for making this happen. I had the good fortune of meeting Alf several months ago, and I can't thank him enough for enabling this. And I also want to thank the Business of Drinks. You'll see this down in the title slide here. I got to know Erica through LinkedIn just kind of by happenstance. Her focus, maybe a lot of you know who she is. She and Felicity, co-founders of Business of Drinks. And the long story short, we thought, what is missing in the beverage and wine consumption industry to gain a better understanding of what's going on with millennials and Gen Z? And none of us could figure out, has there ever been a study that takes a comprehensive look at all beverages, alcoholic and non-alcoholic? And we said, no, I don't think so. Well, let's do that, because as we all know, key competitors of wine, not so much another brand necessarily, but other beverages. So that's kind of how things got going. And as Alf mentioned, this just shows a quick pictorial of the various companies I've worked for before I transitioned out of the corporate world of market research about 3.5 years ago into independent consulting. And you'll see down in the middle bottom, the wine market, which has been my passion for many years. And now I'm in a position to really leverage the experience that I have to the industry that I'm passionate about. And yes, I'm a Badger. Research design, fairly straightforward. We conducted this August and September last year, over 1,300 people, a few more millennials than Gen Z. The millennials in terms of drinking age outnumber Gen Z by a considerable margin, but we wanted to make sure the sample sizes of both were pretty robust to help to facilitate decision making. Respondents were geographically representative of the US population. And importantly, the first half of the study in the survey was focused on beverages, which we'll see. And then the second half, I wanted to make sure we did a deeper dive on wine. By the way, although we have it set up to have questions at the end, if you have a burning question when I get to a slide and you say, I really can't wait, I'd like to ask Roger, just go ahead and interrupt me and we'll have that discussion. So again, the background and objectives, as I mentioned, is we wanted to accomplish a couple of things. One is to look at the entire set of beverage options that Gen Z and millennials are faced with and get a comprehensive and deep understanding of their purchasing and consumption behavior, preferences, perceptions, particularly important usage occasions, which offers some great positioning. And then with wine, just to get a deeper understanding and ask some questions that we feel haven't really been asked before. And again, the study was funded by Research and Marketing Strategies, my consultancy, as well as Business of Drinks. So let's get at the 6 key takeaways. Actually, the full report, which is a 90-page report, that we have 9 in there, but in what the content of this deck represents information that's already in the public domain, either from our press release, podcasts that we did, and also an interview I did with a buyer, a leading beverage publication in the UK. So what we're presenting today is not proprietary, it's in the public domain. So the first key takeaway, it's just not all doom and gloom. And that's I've read so often and hear that, gosh, we're losing the millennials and Gen Zs. Well, as a favorite go-to beverage, wine ties for second with major beer brands for Gen Zs and third for millennials. We asked a question about pre-COVID consumption now versus pre-COVID. 50% more millennials are buying more wine post-COVID than say they're buying less. That's still, 25% and 16%. The majority said about the same. Point being is that this is one additional piece of evidence that wine consumption, within this cohort is actually on the increase. Wine is a preferred beverage for a whole range of at-home occasions. We'll get to that detail in a little bit. At a restaurant and bringing to a dinner. There are 5 key occasions that are highly leverageable from a competitive standpoint for message development. And then key takeaway number 2 is the basics matter. I mean, not surprising, but there's been so much press on eco-friendly, organic, low-calorie. Not that these are not important, but when we ask about, decision-making on what beverage to select, not surprisingly, good flavors is number 1. Easy to find and buy, price, good varieties, kind of your cost of entry variables, if you will. If you don't have these, the rest really don't matter that much. Okay. Number 3, again, the basics matter with wine. Price, easy to find and buy. Friends, family recommendations, number 3. Again, least important are eco-friendly practices, brand name, wine regions, wine apps. Takeaway number 4, reduce barriers to trial and increase consumption. If anybody comes out of another industry, especially like CPG, What's the mantra? Trial and repeat, trial and repeat. You do your advertising to to build awareness and then get trial down the purchase funnel. Fewer than 1/3 spend more than $30 a bottle for wine, and half never buy wine over 50. This is probably not new news to most of you. So this may be the most difficult hurdle to overcome, but it is what it is. So producers in the industry needs to look at other leverage points to look at a price value than just price in and of itself. And the next section down here, we can see what are the popular wines. They tend to be under $20. Rosé, Chardonnay, sparkling wines. And this is even true with other age groups as well. Not low calorie, orange, eco-friendly, sustainable. Single digit percentages emerged here in terms of what they prefer to drink. Are they increasing? Yes, but compared to the more traditional varietals, they're pretty far behind, at least at this stage. Increased accessibility. The virtual wine tasting events that occurred during COVID, no reason at all why not to continue and expand those. I mean, how many people are within an hour of a winery? Not very many. Do affordable events. I think it's Tablas Creek down in Paso Robles. They have a free or much reduced wine tasting on Tuesdays or some day during the week, which creates an opportunity for people who want to try, maybe drink more wine or just increase their knowledge. Just make that make that trial opportunity more available. And then, as we all know, demystify. So when we ask why aren't you, what would make you to try wine? What would get you to drink more? There's just, we have to demystify and educate. Comments like, don't know enough about wine. I'm just overwhelmed. Too many choices. Number 5, leverage preferred resources used to find wine. Not surprisingly, with this group, the top online resource used to find wine to buy is social media, followed by paid search. And this increases the awareness of different brand and wine opportunities and finding the preferred wines that one wants to drink. Social media is closely linked with the number one offline driver, which is family and friend recommendations. Done a lot of work in digital and cross media ad effectiveness, and it's just one of those things where word of mouth, which we call in the ad world free or earned media, conversion rates, not surprisingly, are far higher with a recommendation from this pre-media than any kind of online advertising or any advertising in any channel. And then in messaging, use examples and testimonials of wine enjoyment at various home occasions and eating out. Again, kind of this plays into the social media the landscape. And then finally, number 6, packaging. 4 in 10 have bought wine in a box and 1 in 5 in a can in the past year. I don't know what that incidence is in the general population. My guess is that it's higher, but certainly another leverage point, which does a couple of things. One, it extends usage occasions to outdoor events at the park and so forth. And it also facilitates single servings, which is pretty important because the consumption levels, not everybody's going to down a bottle, 750 milliliter bottle of wine. So this creates the opportunity to have a glass, so to speak. So let's get into the detailed report. And again, the first section is on beverages. So we looked at 14 beverages. So I'm not going to read this. And these red circles, by the way, so let's look at wine. 44.2% millennials indicate they drink wine on a regular basis. 39.3% Gen Zs. What that circle means is that significantly more millennials say that than Gen Z. So whenever you see that red circle, that's all that means. But soft drinks is number 1 by far. The one regret that we have, if we were to redo this, and we may well redo it again, is to split soft drinks into major brands like we did with beers versus the more boutique soft drinks. And there's many brands out there. And so as you can see, we have major brands and craft beers. We want to do that with soft drinks. But having said that, I mean, soft drinks is the clear winner across all kinds of metrics. Not terribly surprisingly, but this shows it quantitatively. But the important thing here is you see where wine is placed vis-a-vis other key competing categories. And then we followed up with a question of what's your favorite go-to drink? And again, we see, not surprisingly, soft drinks. I mean, that's something that people consume kind of almost every day, or many people do apparently. And in wine, we see that it's still like in a number 2 or number 3 position. Millennials, they're more beer people than the Gen Z. So you see the major brands significantly more with the millennials than Gen Z. And let's go down and look at seltzers, non-alcoholic, RTD, canned cocktails. Lot of discussion around these, but look at where they stand in terms of go-to beverages. Will they increase? No doubt. But what we try to do with this study, let's put these kind of hot topic beverages in a larger context of the major alcoholic and non-alcoholic options. We asked the question, factors most important in deciding what beverages to buy. And those of you who are in research, I love the fully labeled scales. So we have extremely, very important, and so on. So what you see, just interpret the bar chart here. Blue, the light blue is extremely important. The light green is very important. And then the salmon colored is the combination of both. So what this does in a glance, you'll see that good flavors, easy to find and buy, price, good varieties. Kind of the basics, not surprisingly, are the key drivers. And you'll see down on the right, healthy, eco-friendly, low no calorie. It's not that they're unimportant, but relative to the basics, they really don't matter that much. Although it's kind of noteworthy if you look at eco-friendly. More Gen Zs are saying that's important than millennials. So, like in all research, when you're doing this kind of fundamental basic research in a category, this is something that should be done every year to see how things are changing or not. Okay, perception. I'm not going to read this whole chart. You're going to get the deck. But what I want to do is call out the wine. You'll see that the 4th column over is good for different occasions in terms of perception for people like me. And if we look at some other beverages, associations are lowest across beverages for eco-friendly, healthy, low or no calorie, low or no sugar, excepting hard seltzers. Not surprising. I mean, this is not, it shouldn't surprise anybody, but it shows how that particular attribute is perceived across beverages versus other attributes. Occasions. These next 2 slides may be the most important in the deck for positioning. When we asked about occasions where they're used, what each beverage is used, you'll see that at home when friends or family come over, at home to go with dinner, at home for only yourself to relax. These at-home occasions are critical. I mean, what great positioning can you garner from that? And the testimonials that you could develop. I mean, I think there's a tremendous opportunity there. And you'll see at the bottom, soft drinks. I mean, they're just super popular across all occasions. It is what it is. And you'll see at sporting events, major beer brands, hard seltzers, soft drinks. Not a surprise. Mm-hmm. Still staying with occasions, wine you'll see bring to a dinner and at a restaurant. And we'll see at a restaurant, we ask for finding out wines to buy. One of the surprises that we found was that's number 2 as a source for discovering wine. So very important for the on-premise. So again, we see wines leverage points here. And let's see, what else do I want to call out? RTD canned cocktails at restaurants are pretty popular, but point is, you'll have a chance to look at this and digest it further offline, but I do want to call out the wine given who all is attending here. So let's get into the wine part. Consumption, how often do you drink? I'd like to call your attention to the right corner where every day and 2 to 3 times a week. So for frequent drinkers, Gen Z is about 21%, Millennials 25%. I'm not sure if that's terribly surprising or not. When I've done a lot of searches, I see data all over the place here, but at least from our study, this is what we're seeing. And price. Okay, I've created 2 boxes here for a reason. So this question discusses frequency of purchase at different price thresholds. In the upper left, that's the sweet spot. And so let's just take a look at weekly, and you'll see that millennials are buying more low price wines than Gen Zs on a weekly basis. That's because of that shading there. That's a statistically significant difference. Monthly, then they become more equal, 26, 25%, and so on. And then when you move to less frequent purchases, that incidence tends to go down. Although less often is still at 22%. I mean, that's the point, it's 22%. Then you go down to the lower right-hand corner, anything over $30 is problematic. It's not that it doesn't happen. And I'm sure there are segments within Gen Z and millennials that are more than happy to spend $30, $40 for a bottle of wine. But overall, it's a lower incidence. And over $50, half just don't even do it. They never have spent over $50. Not a surprise. It just kind of puts this in, kind of supports probably what you already know in terms of positioning on price. Packaging. As I mentioned earlier in my opening comments, wine in a box, about 40% for Gen Z and nearly the same for millennials. Cans, about 1 in 5. So a tremendous opportunity for your product development teams. Clearly, this would support that effort.
Hey, Roger, quick question. The question came in about brand and label design. Was that a factor? Did you determine if that was a factor in any of the purchase decisions, particularly with millennials and Gen Zs?
No, we did not ask that. You think about The Prisoner, the Orange Swift wines. I mean, the guy's a real pioneer in that. My thought on label design is it's probably most important at retail, at the point of sale. People are just kind of figuring out what they ought to try. But having said that, that could be another variable that we would consider for a future study. But something that we definitely should keep in mind.
Okay, thank you.
And just a pitch for market research more generally. I mean, package design research is very commonly done at CPG. I mean, if you have different packaging alternatives that you want to test, do some packaging design research to see which one best communicates your positioning and the brand attributes. Clearly, I mean, it certainly can be done before you spend millions of dollars developing the package. Okay, wine. Similar to beverages, we asked the importance factors in determining what kind of wine, brand or wine to buy. Again, price, not surprisingly. I mean, it's kind of states the obvious. Easy to find and buy, close behind, family friend recommendations, and then things start to decline. Free shipping is down a little, kind of a second tier, offers something new and different. I think that's a very strong positioning. I mean, even though it's not as high as price, easy to find and buy, that could open up the door to saying, hey, look, we've got something really cool that you can try. Critics and experts, not so less important. Eco-friendly, again, down the line, brand name, less important. And I guess that's not surprising. I mean, think about the category. You've got thousands of brands. I mean, it's unlike any other category except maybe craft beer. Wine regions, and least important were wine apps such as Vivino. in terms of, again, the question is how important or not is each of the following factors in deciding what specific kind or brand of wine to buy? So we always have to keep in mind what the question is. One of my favorite questions, I wanted to do a post-COVID study a few years ago. I never got around to it, but I wanted to ask wine purchase consumption compared to before COVID. And here, as I mentioned earlier, we really can't talk about Gen Z because a lot of the Gen Z respondents weren't even of drinking age pre-COVID. So even though I showed the data, I would ignore it. But focusing on millennials here, you see that 25% buying more wine now, 16% say they buy less, and then of course the 58% is about the same. But again, another positive data point that that wine consumption is actually increasing. And then resources relied upon to help find wines to buy. So we had two questions on this. One was online resources, and the second one was offline. And again, this shows the data that I discussed earlier. Not surprisingly, social media, Facebook, next is Google. One of the things I recall from the state of the wine industry that Rob McMillan reports, one thing that stuck out in his comments was only 2% use a TikTok. What an underutilized resource to reach Gen Z and millennials. Although the percent is much higher with Instagram and Facebook, but TikTok is definitely should be a go-to platform. And let's kind of look at other resources here. What's kind of interesting is like online review, wine websites and apps, online reviews, they're just not nearly as important. And then finally, before we get into the Q&A, offline resources. Not surprisingly, recommendations from friends, family members, or colleagues. And I think the most notable thing to me, at least, was wines tried in a restaurant. I mean, I remember going to an Italian restaurant in San Mateo, and I said, "Why don't you serve any Italian wines?" And the general manager said, "Well, because nobody knows about Italian wines. They just like a Cabernet." So, well, why don't you offer them a taste? Why don't you, anyway, it gets back to the old trial and repeat. Get people to try, even if you have to give it away on a free trial basis. If it's a good wine, repeat will happen. And let's see, wine recommendations from a wine shop expert, ratings. There again, these ratings are just much less important. And it might be because they're just not reading the pubs, which is probably what's happening here. Okay, let's do Q&A. And then the other thing I'd like to invite everybody to do is we're talking about, well, if we do another study, we really want to do at least one more, suggestions for other research. So I'm not sure the best way to field your suggestions, but feel free to email me or put it in the chat, or Alf, maybe you have a suggestion here, but we're always open to suggestions for additional research, like the packaging. That's a great suggestion. So anything you want us to consider, we're certainly wide open to doing that. And with that, let me stop sharing. Well, let me keep the slides up. Just
leave the slides up because I'm sure we'll want to refer to them again. Yeah. Roger, I'm gonna kick it off and get the conversation going here. One thing you might want to do at some point is perhaps type in your email address down in that Q&A button or that chat button, and that way anybody who wants to have an offline conversation with you can do so. But I'll let you handle that. I guess my opening question was the one that we had prior to the start of this session today. Having seen what Rob McMillan said with the Silicon Valley Bank report a couple of months ago, that total dollars in the industry were up, but consumption wasn't, and it was the premium labels that were carrying the industry in a sense in terms of its dollar volume targets. if in fact Gen Z and the millennials are drinking under $30 a bottle and they're staying cheap, do you think there's any opportunity for us to get them to upscale to a premium label, something above $50, above $75 a bottle?
Highly unlikely. I mean, even over 50. I mean, like I mentioned earlier, I'm sure there are subsegments within Gen Z and millennials that will drink that, but it's probably pretty small. I mean, that could be the subject of future research, is just to do a segmentation within the millennial and Gen Z cohort, increase that sample size, and take a look, for example, at frequent consumers and high income. Maybe we'll be able to get a profile of those people. But I think the fact of the matter is that there are just too many other alternatives out there for $30 or under, whether it's another beverage or before we even got on, Alf, we talked about, I mean, Spanish and Italian wines. You can get great buys for 20, 15, $20. The other thing is, speaking to the sales and shipment data, I read recently the only area in the country that experienced an increase was Washington State. I don't know if there's anybody from Washington State online, but that just stood out. And hey, I just bought a great Cabernet from a Washington State producer for $28 because I heard about it from somebody on Cellar Tracker. And so the deals are out there. Are they going to be in Napa Valley? No. I mean, the grapes in Napa Valley are 3x even from Sonoma. I mean, it's just, I think the break even to make a cab in Napa Valley is $83 or something like that. There will always be people that will buy the Napa, and the Bordeaux's and the Burgundies, you know, at the very high end. But the Gen Zs and millennials, it's going to be a pretty small segment.
Let me piggyback then onto that question. If in fact they're drinking white, if they have a sweet palate, and obviously we see the soft drink numbers, is there a risk? Is there an existential threat that we will never, that these cohorts will never develop a palate?
Well, I don't know. I think we talked before we got online off about price value, not just price, but price value. I mean, if you can justify $40 for a wine because it's so great and it's a unique opportunity to maybe bring to a dinner party, for example. And again, I would get back to these occasions. So for certain occasions, you know, maybe somebody will spend over $30 for a bottle of wine. But it's just, you really have to think in terms of price value, and that's I think that's the focus, because there are just too many other alternatives out there.
Let me go back to the research itself, the core research. What was the biggest surprise for you? You obviously had some expectations. What was the big surprise, if there was one?
I think there were a couple, but certainly it it debunked a lot, so much of the gloom and doom that I've been reading and hearing out there. I think that was the biggest surprise, that there's many more positives with this younger drinking population than negatives. And I think that was probably the real highlight. The other is, I have to say, soft drinks. Now, granted, we didn't break them into major brands versus other, but that might be the biggest aha coming out of this study.
So let me stay with that. I will use the term doom and gloom. It's unquestionable, I would posit, that COVID did a significant degree of damage to the wine industry. I saw it myself following Napa and Sonoma wineries. Put that in the context of a highly competitive environment with all these categories that are doing better marketing than the wine industry is. How the hell do we capture the imagination and the compulsion and the buying from these Gen Ys and Gen Zs and millennials, who, by the way, you know, have limited time span, limited interest?
Yeah.
Should we not be concerned?
Yeah, well, you raise a couple interesting points. One, the attention span of Gen Zs and millennials. I mean, if you're going to do an ad If it's longer than 5 or 6 seconds, forget it. I mean, unless you create sufficient opportunity or interest for them to click through to a video. But yeah, attention span is low. And I think you have, if I were to look at the wine production category, you've got your top tier, like maybe the 30 largest producers, maybe even less than that. They're, from what I understand, they're behaving a lot like a regular CPG company in terms of a lot of them have their own research teams and staff. They, pretty much go through the three-tier distribution channel. So the dynamics there are far different than the vast majority of wine producers, where DTC is so critically important. I think 8% of sales are DTC, but if you look at the smaller producers, it might be, I'm sure it's much higher than that. Speaking of COVID, what happened was DTC increased by a factor of 5, something that would normally take 3 or 4 years to get that kind of increase, and just increase, substantially. So DTC is so important. And the other thing is that, just like with any other category, what's your annuity? What are your most profitable? Where's your most profitable customers? It's your wine club. So you want to nurture the heck out of them, have the great events, and communicate with them. And if you do a good job with them, you'll get that earned media, free media, where they recommend to others to buy your wine. So for the small producer, that DTC and word of mouth through the wine club and other customers is all important. I mean, they just don't have the budget to generate awareness, in a larger geographic area or people.
Roger, I want to come back just for a moment to the sort of the distinction between the boomer. Let's just say millennial. So boomer one side, millennial the other side. With boomers, with people like us, we were sort of beholden to the allure of wine. We followed the ritual of wine, the swirling. We visited the vineyard. We were enraptured by being able to sit in the fields at dusk and talk wine. There was a whole panoply of characteristics about how we saw wine. Certainly a more upscale experience. This generation wouldn't know Robert Parker if it fell over him, right? They're not reading Decanter. They're not reading the Wine Spectator. They're probably watching TikTok while it's still around. So I want to go positive. If we're talking to this new cohort, what's the new way of talking to them? Obviously, we're going to have to be online because they're going to be buying more of their wine D2C. They're going to be buying that way. They're not walking into a retail store, are they?
That I don't know. That was not a subject of the research, but I mean, I'm a real believer, and maybe this states the opposite. People are creatures of habit. You look at boomers who have been drinking wine for many years; those habits have already been established. Their experience with the Robert Parkers and the publications and wine tasting and the swirl, all that, they've been doing that for years. Gen Zs in particular, they're just entering the category. Many of them, or they're fairly new to the category. So it's a whole different dynamic in terms of trying to get them to try wines versus like the boomer who already has established habits and practices. Probably the word that I would, and I've seen this elsewhere, is the most important thing in any kind of messaging is authenticity. And that's where social media can really come into play, where you're not promoting, come buy my wine. You're telling a story about the authenticity around the experience in the wine that you're producing, and you're communicating it in an authentic way. So I think that's kind of first and foremost, and as far as getting trial with the younger cohort.
Stay with for a moment, just with digital for a moment, digital platforms. Obviously, I heard you say social media of absolute importance. Any other meat you want to put around those bones?
No, I mean, it's kind of stating the obvious. It's just a matter of executing on it. What was it? Another thing out of the state of the wine industry The wine industry spends 2% on marketing. Other categories spend 10%. I mean, it speaks volumes. And now at the same time, we have to understand that most wine producers, they just don't have the budget to spend a lot on marketing. They're just trying to get by day to day. And I get that. But the thing about social media is that if you use it, it's not that terribly expensive. So if you think in terms of word of mouth, where you're getting recommendations, I remember doing a study back when we were looking at brand equity, what's driving brand equity, and recommendations is when you do research, recommendations, likelihood to recommend is a surrogate for advocacy. So that's another thing that, I mean, if we're to do, I've done tons of research where likelihood to recommend is a key metric. So what you want to do is take advantage of social media, and you look at places like, I mean, the great thing about TikTok and Instagram, they have tremendous reach. In the ad world, reach is so important in terms of just generating awareness. Having said that, many wineries, their service area or target market area might be very limited. It's not necessarily national in scope. So it really depends on each producer and each wine company. But nonetheless, social media is a must.
Roger, I'm going to go through some of the comments in the chat button, if I may, and just follow down with me. One of the Carolyn Meyer says include Gen X and Boomers in order to see how Millennials and Gen Z differ and compare, which is, I guess, is the point I was making to try to get a better understanding. We've got a question here. Can you please send out the recording? Yes, there'll be a link will be sent to you this afternoon or tomorrow. Watch for a LuxeStream announcement that's coming from us. Here's one. Do you have a graph of income level and willing purchase price?
No, I don't. Sorry.
Okay. Here's a suggestion. Maybe break down by region. For example, for a long time, we thought of wine being more popular on the West Coast and cocktails on the East Coast. Any comment there?
Yeah, we didn't get into that. I mean, these are all great comments where all these suggestions are, we'd want to take them all and digest them and figure out how we can craft another industry study that answers some of the questions that you all have that just weren't in scope here.
Question here from Britt Miller. Are edibles, etc., impacting consumption?
Yeah, don't have that either. Yeah, for example, I know a really good friend of mine is from Paris, and I mean, she said we only drink wine with dinner. We never drink it alone. So there's obviously cultural things going on here. In the U.S., I would say that that's probably not true with many or most, but yeah, that would be out of scope from this particular research. But we definitely want to consider that.
It shows you where my head is at. When I saw edibles, I automatically thought of cannabis, which raises the question. And I saw a cannabis mentioned a couple of times in the charts. Are you seeing any impact of cannabis on vis-a-vis wine? Is it biting into it at all in any way? Is it
Let's see.
additive?
Let's go to, here we go. THC infused beverages, infused, yeah, CBD infused beverages. Yeah, they're there, but they're down at the bottom.
Okay.
Again, I think we're kind of in the early stages of that. If you were to do this study in 2 years from now, that incidence might be a lot higher.
I suspect it would be.
Yeah, like even with RTD. And I mean, the fact of the matter is that people are drinking less, and a lot of people are like the lower alcohol beverages. But with wine, was it Gießen in New Zealand has come out with apparently just with a delicious non-alcoholic wine. But my understanding is that doing that with wine versus beer is a much steeper challenge.
Question here, by the way, people, are we able to get the full report? Again, you'll put your email address in there, and perhaps people can email you on that question. But it says, Jason says, should wineries start selling brandy to attract Gen Z and millennials and then convert them once they're in the door? I mean,
Oh,
it's an
selling.
interesting question.
You said brandy?
That's what he said. Yeah. See it
Oh,
there?
well, that's interesting. I mean, that's kind of like the old thinking out of the box thing.
It's bait and switch.
Yeah, yeah, that's interesting to think about. I mean, you could do kind of like they say in the marketing world, a line extension. I'm going to open a tasting room that has not just wine but other beverages. That's that'd be interesting to noodle on that one a little bit.
Go back to the can and the box again. 1 in 6 for the cans. And the box was what, 4 in 10, I think.
Yeah, let's see. Let me get that.
My question, Roger, is where the hell are they drinking this? Is this at sporting events? Is this off-premise occasions?
Oh, it would be, well, we can get back to occasions, but here's a slide that shows it. And let me get back to occasions and see what that, okay. Sporting events. Sporting events, wine. Oh, look at that. 10%, 17%. Very low.
Hmm.
Yeah. I mean that, but having said that, I mean, if you to the extent that more and more wine is produced that way and gets out into the market, those percentages probably certainly would go up, I would think. Or like at a
I,
concert, you see it's a little that is higher. So it's just, I mean, the big picture here is just it creates additional occasions and opportunities, more occasions, and a single serving.
Roger, let's wrap this up. I've got a couple of closing issues I want to raise with you. If you're talking to the trade, what's your message to the trade? Give me your headline for the wineries to begin with.
The headline with the wineries: pay attention to your customers, understand them in depth. I do market research workshops, and it's just the mindset of saying, why should I think so hard about what I should produce and how much I should produce and to whom? Why don't I just talk to my customers and find out what they want? I mean, it's not rocket science. That simplifies so many things, and that kind of research or consumer research is routinely done in so many other categories. Because what it does, it takes the risk, it removes much of the risk in decision making. That's why people do research. It's not what I think; it's what my customers and targeted non-customers think. I mean, that would be my first and foremost advice. And work with somebody who knows how to ask those questions and to whom.
Talk to me about promotional channels. It strikes me that millennials and Gen Z are very promotionally motivated. So they're not going to come to the winery. They're not going to drive up to Napa and visit the winery and do a tasting there, but they will go to Bottle Rock. Am I right or wrong?
Yeah, I think you're right, and I think part of it is just logistics. Like I mentioned earlier, I mean, how many people really, have access to a winery? I live in Northern Marin. I can drive over to Napa and Sonoma in half an hour, but not everybody can do that. So that's why I think the virtual tasting, make it convenient and accessible. And if you have a good product, it's like, again, getting back to the old CPG mantra: trial and repeat. Create an environment where people can try. And I will almost guarantee you that that price issue will be less important to some, if not many.
So again, go back from a promotional point of view. What does the promotional activity look like?
Uh, well, this kind of gets into message development, but I think the overall context is authenticity and to demystify what you're offering. And I would do, I'm kind of thinking out loud here. I would probably do some focus groups, maybe even with some Gen Zs and millennials, and say, what kind of gets you going? What would attract you to try wine or drink more or come to my winery. I mean, just kind of dig into it. And
Am
see,
I being? I'm sorry.
no, go ahead. I mean, I think it's one of those things where you kind of the routine in market research, you do qualitative and then you do quantitative. No reason to reverse that. You've got this quantitative study and many others that might stimulate some qualitative research to really dig down.
Is it unfair to all the other wineries for me to say single out? Let me pick two wineries in particular that at least have the perception or the reputation of appealing highly to Gen Y and Gen Zs. And I'm picking The Prisoner and I'm picking Ashes and Diamonds.
Okay. Well, the
If
prisoner,
go ahead.
we know what the price point is on the prisoner.
Right.
um,
What else are they doing that's helping them capture the zeitgeist, if you will?
I don't know. I mean, what they're obviously famous for is their labeling. I mean, um, yeah, what a success story that's been. And I know one of the wineries was it Bogle, but has come out with aluminum bottles. So there's a lot of innovation that's going on. But again, when you get to packaging, that's again, I would highly recommend that you do some package design research before you invest a lot of money in redesign.
Okay. Roger, any other closing thoughts? We'll wrap this up
Uh,
now.
no, I'm just wide open to suggestions and questions. So I will put my email here.
If you will do that, um, I get the feeling that you may be repeating the study in future years. If that's the case, we've certainly captured a lot of the comments today on suggestions of questions and topics that can be added as well. And I'm seeing your email address, brooks@researchandmarketingstrategies.com.
There's that, and also you'll see down at the bottom the full 90-page report goes obviously into much more detail. We have it up. We're still selling it. We're offering a 30% discount, so I think it's around $1,400 now versus $1,995. And but yeah, so it's out there. How long we're going to keep it out there, I'm not sure, but it's still available. And I just would like to offer, if anybody wants to email me and just have a chat one-on-one, that's fine too. I mean, I can talk about wine all day. and and probably most important are the suggestions for future research. Already heard some really good ones today.
Well, Roger, we appreciate your time. We appreciate you taking us through the report. Every piece of information we can glean on this cohort is of extreme importance to us and certainly to the future of the industry as well. So I thank you for being with us and sharing your information with us as well. Again, we will send out a recording link this afternoon or this evening for today's program. You'll be able to review the charts on that. You'll be able to stop and start and review the charts on that recording. And of course, you've got Roger's email address if you want to conduct an offline conversation with him. And with that, ladies and gentlemen, we are adjourned. It's been a pleasure to have you with us. And let's all go have a glass of wine. I'm certainly in the mood for one. I assume you are as well, Roger. Thank you so
Amen.
much.
Well, thank you so much, Elf, and everybody for taking the time to attend, and hope it was helpful.
It was. Take care, y'all.
Bye-bye now.